My name's Mauri, and I've got Jack on. This is the first installment of Mountain Routes Over Coffee that I've done in a few years. And it's actually what I started doing, the Tactical Alpinism podcast and stuff with a few years ago. And the intent was to analyze a route or an approach for an objective to show the process that we use to get to a at least initial plan. For some of these Mountain Routes Over Coffee episodes and discussions, I'll come in knowing the route or it's a route I've already done. And then for others, I'll come in having zero information about the route. The purpose of that is so that I can show the process that I go through to start planning an objective with my background as both a professional mountain guide who does this for a living and then also from the military operational planning background, which I believe has a lot of strong value for those of us going after recreational objectives. And so I'll hand it over to Jack to introduce what the route and objective we're looking at. And actually, before you do that, if you could intro yourself a little bit and your background of why you're doing this.
Hey, so I'm Jack. I started climbing when I was at West Point, class of 2019. I was on the mountaineering club and then the competitive climbing team for a little bit there. Graduated and commissioned. I was an infantry officer for about 5.5 years, climbing like pretty much the whole time. Spent time obviously at Benning and then Bragg, and then finished out at 5th RTB as a RI at Mountain Face. But what we're going to go over today is I'm currently planning a trip to head over to the Bugaboos. With one of our like major goal routes is the Becky Chenard on the South Howser Tower.
Awesome. And this is a zone that I have zero familiarity with other than like knowing the Bugaboos is a rad place to go climbing. I've never been up there, and that actually fits within the idea of these episodes really well because one, I'll get some things wrong, and we'll probably get a few things wrong here and there as we go through, but it's really a look at like what the initial planning process is, because the way I like to say is that like the preparation, like doing 80% of the work ahead of time means that we have a majority of it right, and there's sort of small adjustments that need to be made to the end. And so that's kind of the joke is it takes 20% of the time to get 80% of the planning done, and then the remaining 20% takes frickin' forever to get taken care of. But cool. So I'm gonna share my screen to start. And if there are awkward pauses, it's because we're clicking through stuff as we do this. Awesome. So you'll be able to see a Caltopo map that is up on the screen. And this map, we just marked a few features before we started. The only looking I did just to like keep this discussion moving a little bit was like, what are the grid coordinates for a few of the key features? Specifically, the Bugaboos themselves, or the Bugaboo Spire, which you can see where my mouse is on the top, in kind of the middle of the screen. You have the Howser Towers, which is where the Becky Chenard is, in the bottom left of the screen. And then you have the Bivy Boulder area, or the Bivy area, that Jack and team will be staying at. And then moving up to the top right, we have the trailhead. And so we pulled that information from looking at Mountain Project for the grids, but the first thing that we could have even done without that is if we just went to the Bugaboos in the first place, is I could have clicked on this feature called Shared Maps, and now you see, as I zoom in, that you have all these different heat maps that have shown up, and these are routes that other people have either used or planned in this area. And so that shows like this area, this route on the backside or the north side of the South Howser Tower is likely a descent or a movement between camps, because somebody could have bivvied on top or at the north base of the tower. If I click on it, it gives us a little information. So they're like, oh, day 8 descent. So they are coming down off of the Howser Tower then, more than likely. Some of them will even give the created by information if they have made it a fully public map. In this case, this one I pulled up is saying unavailable. Yep. And let's see if any of them give their information. Yeah, so all the ones I'm clicking on say unavailable. That is a way that you could actually get some additional beta, is if somebody had their information shared, is you could always message them as well. But now as I turn, and then the final piece is we couldn't find the exact trailhead coordinates right away. But as we look at this, we could see where like pretty much all of these routes originate from here in the top right. And so like I identified that during the prep for this discussion as like essentially at the same time that Jack found the actual coordinates for the trailhead. So heat maps can speed up some of the information quite quickly. And then as we look at this, some of these other features in here, you'll see that people have added other things. We have the Conrad Kane hut is what it looks like it's labeled as. And we have like a heli thing that's listed as a start. We have a few other bivvy sites. And so it just gives us quite a bit of information where Jack could even import this information into their map so that they can like have all these different features named, which is kind of where we will start as we go. And the process that I go through when I am working on a new to me area is I'll first just identify and name features. And this is part of my like getting to know the area. And so here we have like the Bugaboos area in general. And I'm actually going to move this to be right over Bugaboo Spire, which is labeled on this map layer as well. And then we have Snowpatch Spire is another one that we can name if we chose to. I'm just going to keep Bugaboo Spire and Howser Towers named as the main things for this map. But if we wanted to go more into detail, we can name each of the individual features. We could also name the different bivvy sites, for example. Now, I currently have the map layer of hybrid that you can see here in the top right selected. And I could click that over to topo. I could click it to imagery. But I often, when I'm planning, like keeping myself in the hybrid layer because that is a mix of both a little bit of imagery and the topo map builder hybrid. The second thing I've clicked on is our slope angle shading here, which is what has added all these colors. That is how I was able to quickly identify where the cliffs are in this area, and it sort of helps things pop a little bit. The final piece that I like to add on is the shaded relief, which you can see now it really adds in like shading as I go up to near 100%. I like to have it sit right about 30% because that just helps things pop. And if, say, Jack wanted to print a map out before he went with all this information on it, instead of just having it digitally on his phone, he could even like set these layers this way and make the map appear the way he wants so that it could print really nice and easy. A final thing I like to do to help me, and some people don't like doing this, is I'll add the grid lines here, which are those blue boxes. So now I know 1 kilometer squares. And for the military folks that are following, you'll see that I have the opportunity to put UTM and USNG as my coordinate systems. USNG is the military grid reference system, and UTM is very, very similar to the military grid reference system. And so you'll see down at the bottom, we now have grid coordinates running from left to right and top to bottom on the side. And those big numbers are where you would start your 8-digit grid. And so you can see these are 1 kilometer grid squares based off of it being just 2 digits for each of the squares. The small digits before, you can ignore those. Those are a bigger, larger map, like 100 kilometer square area. Okay, so first thing I like to do now that we have trailhead and sort of our objective area marked is I'm just going to add a line to start getting some information here. And that's, as you'll see, we have a trail that already starts to show. I'm going to zoom in on that just a little bit. That's a little bit more than I wanted to. Boom. There we go. And so the nice thing on Caltopo is that from the trailhead, I can take this in as far as I want. It looks like it makes sense to go to about this turn. And then from there, potentially head down this slope or down this slope. And the reason I'm saying that is looking at the slope angle shading, that's where it's yellow to no color, meaning that it is a less steep slope to work with. And then as we come through here, we can kind of come across this area or this area, and really it all looks pretty flat based on the contour lines that we're looking at. From there, we can either come through this notch or this notch to get to our bivy boulder that we've already marked. And so for now, I'm just going to click that in as our route, and we can turn back on our shared maps and see how that compares to what other folks have done. And so here, where we did that loop down off the trail, looks like some other folks have continued straight through that area. And then some other folks have continued up and right and come across through this notch
Yeah,
to
so
get to that bivy
Maury, I
boulder.
think for
So
that sort of route thing,
that,
if you
yep,
look at where other people have shared for that, like the Bugaboo snow patch call,
yep,
is like sort of the traditional way to get into the East Creek drainage over onto that
mm-hmm,
side. Um, it just goes out later in the season, so that's when people
yep,
come for that like southerly route. So we're going there kind of early season in that like late June, early July timeframe. So I think the
cool,
Bugaboo Snowpatch Coal will be
yep,
like open, but like that is a question, and so like we can have like the two alternate routes on there.
yep. Exactly where I was going is like when there's a longer approach and it's not necessarily a definitive approach, that's exactly what I like to do is have at least two options. And so here is the second route option would be coming a little bit more north to get into that East Creek Bivy boulder. And so now we have two routes that branch right in here that we can choose from. And
What the
now,
fuck?
sort of before we
Hold on.
go too far, like we have our initial, let's call it like really tentative plan that we built really quickly. And so now we have our initial plan. And I stopped sharing the talk through a few points and the sequence I go through as I'm doing this. And Jack laughed when I told him this in the pre-recording, like prepping a little bit before we started, which I use the military's 5-paragraph operations order as the sequence that I go through for this process. And so paragraph 1 is situation, where we're just trying to identify what's going on with this whole thing that we're looking at. Now that we have our quick, dirty 5-minute plan, that's where we get stuff like what Jack was saying, that the north approach route is the one that is more commonly used in early season, and the south is the later season approach. And so one resource that I'll show during this that is often used for getting a lot of that information is Mountain Project. And you also get it from guidebooks and then other people's beta. If you can identify some of the people that have gone there. Like I have a few friends that have gone to this area, so I might call them and see like, hey, does this information make sense? But I've pulled up the Bugaboos first and then Howser Towers rock climbing. And so now I can look at information about the routes, gives a description about the routes. And it's like the tallest of all Bugaboo spires, the Howser Towers, both the biggest and some of the hardest climbs in the park. Getting there, this is where Mountain Project can be useful and can not be sometimes. Sometimes they'll have GPX routes in there and like some really detailed information. And then other times, like this for getting to zones, it says 3 different approaches depending on where you're trying to get to. For east and northeast faces, you'll approach via the Upper Vole Glacier. And to get to the west face of the North Tower, you'll take the North Shoulder Call. And so Upper Vole Glacier is going to be one of the things I'm going to note, because since we're going to we're going, which tower is the route you're going to on, Jack? Let's see, South Howser Tower is where Becky Chenard is, and that's just from scrolling down a little bit. And so for the South Howser Tower, it actually doesn't say from what I can see.
Mhm.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. South and Central Towers use the East Creek approach. And so we'll check out exactly where East Creek is and if our lines line up with that or not once we get there. Then as I keep scrolling down, it'll give the information about the routes that we have in this area. So total climbs gives it by percentage, by grade. So you can see there's a lot of 511s, a few 512s. And that's not necessarily all the routes. It's just the ones that have been uploaded on Mountain Project. I can then also sort the routes, and then I can look at weather information. And sometimes I'll go and like use a AI tool or just Google itself to see like what are the climate averages for this area. But what month are you going in, Jack?
Uh, July, so like mid to early
Okay,
July.
cool. So I'm looking at July, and here it gives us our weather averages now for July. And so July, we have a high of 67, low of 40, 15 days of precipitation, and 2.9 inches. So it's a lot of days with precipitation, but not necessarily a ton of precipitation over those days, because 2.9 inches in one storm is a lot, but over
Hmm.
a month isn't necessarily a ton. And you can also see as you look along this graph on the bottom is that the green are the days with precipitation. And so actually like April is the lowest month for precip, but that would be pretty darn cold for rock climbing. And then we get into September and October, which are fewer days of precipitation and less precipitation. So like maybe early September or late August could be kind of a prime season. But at the same time, if we look back at days with precipitation on the screen, that gives us 12 versus 15. So while the bar chart makes it look a lot better, it's not actually that much better. It's only 3 days difference and an inch of total moisture. And so July, like really the summer months and probably going when it's warmer, is the way to go. And if it's going to be a colder day, then I imagine Jack would want to climb on a south face so he's in the sun. And if it's a warmer, hotter day, then we might shift to some of the north faces or shaded features that maybe get like afternoon sun only instead of first thing in the morning sun if it's a hot day. Any thoughts from just looking through that portion, Jack?
Yeah, when I think especially for this area too, like kind of how I mentioned with the Bugaboo and like Snowpatch Call there, really I think the issue is like when the snow starts to melt. So that's why like that August, September time frame, things start to melt out and rocks start to get looser and and that's why that season isn't the peak season. And then you can see that on Mountain
Yep,
Project. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, and actually on Mountain Project, it'll also show like what the peak season is for when things get ticked, as far as like when people climb them. And then I'm gonna zoom out just a touch. I'm gonna turn off slope angle shading, and just based on what Jack was saying there, we can also look at some historical like snow coverage for the area. And so this is Sentinel Weekly, and let's see, I'm going to go back into last July 2025, and just sort of see where the snow coverage was during that period. Okay, it looks like it might not have coverage or might have been cloudy during this flyover. So let's just sort of look and see. Yeah, we're getting sort of minimal coverage in this area on the Sentinel Weekly imagery. Now I'm going to go to some of the Google satellite imagery. And the thing with Google Satellite is I can actually look down at the bottom here, and it says 2026, but it doesn't say the date. Sometimes it will say the date. Usually it's summer in this area, but I could probably do a little bit more research and find out exactly when the flyover was. Because now you can see, I just based on the snow coverage looking at this, I'd imagine it was like late spring, early summer. But that can give you an idea of what the snow coverage and the travel looks like. And if I wanted to get myself back to like just seeing what the elevation gain and loss looks like, now I can turn on contours. And so now we have two routes on here, and I'll go back to the Map Builder Hybrid. And the final piece that I wanted to add was like there is the potential for sort of a third route branch in here that I am seeing, and that's just based off of slope angles. And that could be this little branch that we talked about before. And so that could just be like a little edit to the second route that we can have in there. And so now, like, really, we have 3 route options based on what we're actually seeing. And the thing I'll do to compare now is I'll click on these approach routes. And so I'll first click the south approach. We can look at profile and travel time. So I'll start with profile. So you've got 4,000 feet of elevation gain and 1,400 feet of elevation loss. It's just under 5 miles total. And then for the south route, or wait, that was the south route, the north route. Let's see what we got. So just over 5 miles and close to 5,000 feet of elevation gain and loss, and of elevation gain rather, and 1,300 feet of elevation loss. So fairly close in total distance and elevation change as we go. And as we look, we can also see like where the high point of that approach is. And as I'm moving this, you can see a dot moving along the green line. And the highest point along this route is like right as we get into this call up in here where they then drop down towards their bivvy site. So as we plan this out now, I'm going to go and look at or add a few features to the route. And Jack, this will be very similar to what you've done in the military of adding checkpoints into your route. And I'm just going to put a few in here as spots to keep us, let's call it honest, as we move. And we can always add more detail as you get further in. So this is I'm going to put in checkpoint 1 as our spot where we select which route we're going. So route decision point. 2 might be, let's just go here where these 2 routes come together. And I'm just naming that bottom of slope, or excuse me, I'm naming that checkpoint. Putting it as checkpoint 2B, just so it's on the south route, and I'm also coloring it red. And that is bottom of the slope that we come down here. And then we have our call that I'll mark before we get to the East Creek Bivvy Boulder. So we have a call here that we're going to drop through. The other information I might put on those checkpoints is like maybe if we were in a crevassed area, which this doesn't look very crevassed, and I'd do a little bit more research and a little bit more looking at imagery to make sure that that's the case. If it was super crevassed, maybe I'd put at checkpoint 2 Bravo, or where the mouse is now, if we're getting onto snow and a glacier, like, hey, this is where we would rope up. And then maybe at 3 Bravo, if the snow ends and we don't have crevasses, then maybe this is where the ropes come off. And so that's a way that we can also add a little bit more clarity to our plan based on what the hazards are that we're trying to mitigate at the time. I'm just going to keep adding a few more checkpoints. I'm changing the colors so that they match the routes just because that helps my OCD a little bit. And I could name checkpoint 2 Alpha, but I'm just going to leave it as checkpoint 2 because it's on the primary route we intend to take. And a call for the military folks is essentially a saddle, where it's a low point in the high terrain, as it were. Then do you know if this one has a specific name for this call
Um,
here, Jack?
I I don't remember if it has a specific name or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just
Then
kind of like the Howser
I'll just
Tower
put it as
call.
like call between Pigeon and Howser Tower. Cool. And so now we have like our checkpoints marked. And if this route was had more complexity to it, maybe there's a lot more turns. Maybe we wanted to be a little bit better prepared for nighttime or limited visibility navigation, then we would totally add more checkpoints. For military operations, like it'd be a rare time where we wouldn't have checkpoints like within every kilometer or so, just so we had like a decision point or something to pause and check as you moved. Whereas like on this one, we have 3 checkpoints over 5 miles, which isn't a ton of information necessarily. And then the final piece is, now that we have those checkpoints marked, is I can go look at travel time. And so I've clicked on the north approach here, and I can click on travel time for this route. And now the reason I added those checkpoints in is now it's built my route plan for me that you can see I'm highlighting here on the screen. So for hike, and this is using what's called Munter units, and it gives us a estimated approach time. It also gives it for hiking, bushwhacking, skiing. And if you've never used Munter units before, I'd leave them just as they are. If you know that you move faster than the typical, because like Jack, you've spent a lot of time rucking with a lot of weight on your back, I'm imagining, as an infantry officer. And
Oh
so like
yeah, yeah.
maybe we would speed this up a little bit. And so maybe we leave the up as 4, or maybe we go to custom and maybe we'll bump the up to a 5 instead of a 4. The flat will be a 7 instead of a 6, and then the down will be a 7 instead of a 6. Right? And now that has sped us up to 4 hours and 51 minutes. Or we can leave this as the way it was, which is 5 hours and 58 minutes. And we can just, like, Jack, have you used Munter units before?
I actually haven't, no.
Okay. And so if you haven't, then I'd say leave it as where it is, and
Mhm.
then see and note like what time you get to points. And you could do this during some
Yeah.
of your, like, if you're doing any prep approaches or other
Yeah.
routes that you're doing closer to you that have some
Mhm.
approaches, you could always do this process and then check what the munter time was compared to how you were moving, and make those custom adjustments. Um, and then the other piece is, if you have more technical terrain or more scree type loose slopes, that'll
Mhm.
slow you down too. And so maybe that segment we'd break out separately on its own. And like if we're going up a scree slope, maybe we turn that into a bushwhack munter unit, where it's just going to be a lot slower for that section. The final piece is, now we can see like, hey, we have these notes on the right side. And things I like to put here are 2 things. One, descriptors of the route. So it's like, we're passing a call. We have the Bugaboo Spire to our north. And so we can see here, I call it Bugaboo Spire call. And then maybe this is a section where we throw on a rope. And so if we're planning to throw on a rope there because we're going to be crossing a glacier, that's a great spot to add that note. And maybe also because we're crossing snow, this area is pretty flat. But if it maybe wasn't as flat and it was a steeper slope, we'd know,
Mhm.
like, also put on crampons
Yeah.
at this point, or micro spikes at this point, if it was a steeper snow covered slope for us to cross. The other would be, is like, for Jack, right? Like in the week before you go, it could be worth checking to see if there's recent snow. I don't
Mhm.
imagine there will be
Yeah.
snow because it's generally not cold enough this time of year. But that could help you decide if you're going to put on snowshoes or bring snowshoes at all. And so the way you could do that other than just like looking at weather station, or other than looking at the historic weather from the previous months or weeks rather, is in Caltopo. I can go to weather stations, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Let's see what weather stations pop up, if any, in this area. Not seeing any in the immediate vicinity. Let's zoom out a little more. There we go. So we have one here on the Conrad Glacier where I can view the chart. And now this one gives me temperature and snow depth. And so that's not going to be exactly what's going on the where you're going, but
Mhm.
you can see that, like, okay, snow depth, this black line, and it's also indicated here, is gradually dropping. Then it
Mhm.
went from 72 to 75 here, so we got a few inches of snow on the 31st of May. And then we see a drop in the snow here, and that correlates with a temperature spike, so it makes sense. And then you can do this for the week before you go, looking at these weather stations, to see, is like, okay, was there a foot of new snow that we weren't expecting that got dropped in this area, or was there a ton of rain in the last week, so maybe that's loosened some things up on the routes that we otherwise wouldn't know about. And now I can also check snowpack. Okay, we have two more weather stations down to the south as well. And so I can also check wind. And so now we just have one weather station here that is doing wind. And so this one's Rory Creek. And I am going to zoom in on this because wind, yeah, it's kind of like mid-slope. So wind sensors, we often like to be a little bit higher, but this one does look like it's in an open area. Or, yeah, it's kind of open, but it's definitely a little bit more sheltered. And so I don't know if I'd use that one as a wind sensor. But I've zoomed out a little bit more. Let's see if there's any like in this range. Yeah, there aren't really wind sensors like that are close by. Like maybe this one could be useful. I'll just zoom in to see. Yeah, this one would probably be a little bit more useful than the other one because it is a ridgetop wind sensor. And so if we're worried about winds over the past week, if they've been like transporting snow, or like as we're walking in, if like, hey, was it actually as windy as the forecast said, we can confirm what the forecast was saying for the last week based on how those wind sensors are presenting. And then the final piece is I'll go back to temperature. And now I can use these temperature sensors to see just like were the temperatures where we expect them to be for the averages for this time of year. And because we're in May, for May and April, it was like mid 50s to mid 40s to mid 50s for the highs. And so that jives. And then down into the upper 30s and mid 20s for the lows. And so we can get the temperatures from the past week as well. So these weather stations aren't as useful for a rock climbing objective as they are for a skiing objective for identifying the way the snowpack's changing, but they can really help us identify as like, okay, what were the differences in where that specific sensor is compared to what the forecast said for the zone,
Mhm.
so we can now get a little bit of real world ground truth. Okay, so that being said, like that kind of ends the Caltopo portion of this. Or actually, we do have, before I hit stop share, the last little bit of getting actually to the base of the routes
Mhm.
here. And so honestly, like going to the South Howser Tower is where the route is, and it's like you'll be able to see it when you get there.
Yep.
So it's not really here, it's not a long approach from the bivy site. But if it was a more complex or longer approach, say we wanted to come over to this like west facing feature, then we could make a plan for probably coming up and over this shoulder and then dropping down to get to the base of that wall. Or potentially we would bivy in a slightly different location, maybe. But But just like looking at the map, this would be one option, and then the other would be potentially instead like coming around and bivvying like over up in here potentially, and doing the approach this way, the way I'm running the map. If we are going to say this wall, for example.
Yeah, the what you're pointing out there, that's like the North Howser Tower. So like,
Yep.
listen to your podcast recently with Jared Smiley, him going
Mm-hmm.
over, like he was talking about all along the Watchtower, which is like a dream route
Yep.
over there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
511 C1 or C2, and
Nice.
like that's how you would approach it. You have to wrap down like in that, like
Yep.
off of right there. Can't see my mouse obviously,
Yep.
but like, yeah.
Yeah, like right where my mouse is now about.
No, on the south, like that ridge that's south of the North Hauser Tower. That's like where you're kind
Okay.
of committed because of where
Yep.
that steep slope angle is right there.
Totally.
Because like you have to wrap in.
Yep. And, yeah, and if you're not familiar with the slope angle shading on Caltopo, you can actually look at the bottom of the screen here to see that. And actually, I'll just show a few more features I became recently aware of to sort of help identify where cliffs are. But first is like if you see purple or blue on the slope angle shading, it's probably a cliff. If you see black, it is definitely a cliff. And then I'm going to turn off the slope angle shading here. And we can go to our imagery, and I'll use the Caltopo provided imagery. And we can go to 3D for this area, and it'll take a minute to adjust. And then it gives you information for how to change what you're showing as you go. And I leave this up because I forget every time. But now I can shift my perspective by doing Control and drag, and it's just, there we go. And I'm doing this kind of slowly just because my computer's being a little slow right now, and I can shift my perspective, and we can now see, like, here is definitely a steep slope, which that's the South Hauser Tower that we're going to climb. We can also zoom in on like these checkpoint 3s, which were the steep sections of our route, and see, like, does it make sense now that we have this 3D imagery up to go through those zones? And it seems reasonable still. Maybe like this line might need to shift a little bit closer to us as we're looking at it, for example. But not the end of the world, because that's something you can definitely identify while you're moving through the terrain. Then the other piece I can look at as I'm doing this is like, okay, are there crevasses in here? And yeah, there definitely looks to be some cracks as we go that we could have identified on imagery, but also are shown up now that we're in 3D, like right in here, right in this section of the route. We can see like we got a little bit closer to this rock feature. And as we get to where glaciers come together, like these two are, or we get near to rock features, there are more cracks that show up. And so for this, that could be a spot where we'd edit this route a little bit and take it a little bit wider to avoid some of that crevassed terrain, and mitigate some of our hazard of like falling into the mountain, as it were. Then we can do the same thing for our green route. I'm going to turn off 3D just to move a little bit quicker. And you can see that we can still see where these crevasses are as we're doing that. So here's making a few more edits. There we go. I like the look of that better because that keeps us away from crevasses. And crevasses habitually form in the same spot because they're largely based on the surrounding and the underlying terrain. And so they'll habitually form in the same spots. And then as we come in to check our route here on this green route, that looks pretty reasonable because we're coming across kind of like a perennial snowfield through this section. So like if it was like this was dirt, maybe you'd move a little bit further south to stay on snow, for example, to make it a little bit easier to travel. And as we get into here, we get a little bit close to some crevasses again. So maybe we'd take this line and move it a little bit further away from those features. to mitigate and just stay in the meat of the snowfield instead. And this is where we get into some of that like more precise like micro planning for sure. Now it's hard to tell looking at this imagery. I'm going to pop on the Google imagery and just see if it shows something different. Yeah, it doesn't really show more clearly what we have going on there. The Caltopo imagery is doing a better job of showing the crevasses, it looks like, at least just based on when this imagery was taken. But that gives us a good macro route plan for Jack to operate off of. So I'm going to stop the share there and just sort of talk the difference in the mapping that we just did versus actual walking on the ground. And I always call the mapping that we did just now the macro plan, like the big picture plan. It's pretty coarse. You can get decently detailed, but it's not exactly what we're necessarily going to do. Whereas when we are walking in terrain, that's where we make these micro adjustments. And so the purpose of doing this macro planning is so that we can make the decisions that we need to make when we're in the field, but we don't need to make like big picture decisions that we could have made from the comfort of our home. For examples, like, are we going to follow route green or route red for this? And like, we can make that decision before we go, and then maybe we write a note where we put that first checkpoint, our marker 1 of like, hey, if we see this,
mm-hmm.
then we would take route red instead. And so that's like, we could even call that a decision point, because that's really the only decision point we need for the whole approach, from what I'm seeing, is where those routes branch off.
Yeah, and we've got like a couple days that we're going to spend kind of closer to that Bugaboo Spire area too.
Awesome.
And so we'll be able to identify like, oh, is this melting out? Basically, you can see it kind of from across the snowfield glacier. Like,
yeah,
is it melting out? So, yeah.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, just like if we're looking for avalanches and whatnot, is you could sit far enough away from these spires, or even while you do the approach, and you can like listen for rockfall.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see if there are wet sections too, and that'll give you a lot of information on like how active some of those features are at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Rockfall is a little bit less consistent and easy to predict, or it's pretty hard to predict, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Just the times when rockfall happens is when you have a spring thaw, and then also a ton of moisture that's fallen and loosened things up. Yeah, what questions and or thoughts do you have from going through that portion of the process?
Yeah, I like starting out on the map here before we get into like sort of the nitty-gritty of when we're getting into like the actual route itself.
Yep.
And then I'm one thing that I think maybe not neglected here, but like descents. It's like starting backwards, basically. Like thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the descent off of the tower and incorporating that in kind of our like when we start thinking about the next step of like
Yeah,
actually
totally.
how we're gonna approach the route.
Yeah. And do you have a specific tower for Howser Tower, or do you want it for the Bugaboo Towers as well, as far as descents go?
I think we can focus on the like Howser Tower for this one
Mm-hmm.
because kind of our plan is we've got like 4 to 5 days that we're gonna spend in sort of that Bugaboo Spire, Snowpatch
Yep.
Spire sort of area, and then move over from there, basically from around our checkpoint 1 to the East Creek Bivy site and spend like another 5 to a week there. And so we have a little bit of time to sort of recon like, okay, here's what the descent's going to be looking at, and here looking at the descent route, and then kind of checking out the conditions and everything. So I think South Hauser Tower, focus on that descent for us here.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I just pulled up the mountain project for this, and it actually gives a pretty detailed description of the descent, which is pretty sweet. And so it gives each of the pitches in the descriptions here. Mountain project, like, definitely take some of the information with a grain of salt and like vet the information, which I
Mhm.
might be telling you something you already know, Jack, on that. And then from there, you can get your descent description, and usually the descent description's in the bottom of the block about the information. And what's cool is
Yeah.
this one actually says there is a bolted wrap line starting from
Yeah.
the north side of the summit block, and there is a station map showed in the cane hut. So that gives me a like,
Yeah.
okay, I am stopping in the cane hut
Yeah.
to make sure I get a picture of that.
Yeah.
And then as you're approaching this via that green route, I'd highly recommend taking a picture of the north side of the Howser
Mhm.
Tower, because then you might be able to zoom in and identify some of the features.
Off. And so, like, that would be preferred, but I think we'll be able to, like we said, identify it from that approach while we're going
Yeah,
through.
totally. Yeah, and you might bring like a tagline
Yeah.
for Holland or whatever behind you,
Mhm.
which can be pretty sweet. I'll often do hauls as well, where you would do like a mid-pitch haul, so you don't need to bring a tagline.
Yeah.
So like you would climb up to a crux, leave the bags hanging on a piece of gear
Mhm.
just below the crux, and then the second can attach them both to like a loop of rope you hang down
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
above.
Mhm.
That technique works pretty well if it's a shorter haul.
Yeah.
For here, it looks like most people wrap with a 70
Yeah.
using 8 wraps, and then just one note that I'm actually catching is some parties put a V thread because their ropes don't reach
Yeah.
over the Bergstrand.
Mhm.
And so actually this is where I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Nadav from Peak Innovations, who has these like 4-gram V-thread tools
Oh, yeah. Nice.
that like you
Yeah.
can just throw one of these in a pocket, and or like in the ice screw
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
you bring for the glacier
Yeah.
travel, and then like you don't even have to remember that you have it.
Alright. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, he just started selling those like, I don't know, a few months ago.
Oh, that's cool. I've seen like the J snares and things, but those are a little like
Yeah.
bulkier and like heavier. But
The J snares are kind of annoying and finicky. These are it like you
Mhm.
can see the black bit.
Yeah.
It's essentially a Chinese finger trap,
Mhm.
where it's like 2 magnets that you stick in, the magnets connect to each other, and then the
Yeah.
rope goes in to the finger trap bit, and
Mhm.
then you just pull it through super easy.
Sweet.
The only negative to that is you can't use it to clean out snow or ice from the inside of a screw, but
Yeah.
you're not ice climbing, so it's not a
Yeah.
huge issue
Yeah.
to do that while you're on lead, or like while
Yeah.
you're up,
Yeah.
because you're not placing a ton of screws.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's one that I'd add to like the gear list is like, one, you're crossing a glacier, so like you'll probably want to have an ice screw. But
Yeah.
then two, actually you wouldn't necessarily think it, but you might want to have an ice screw in your pack for the descent, just in case you needed a V thread.
Yeah, that we were planning on like bringing at least one for the V threads.
Cool. Yep. And then as far as other information I just picked up from looking at the pitch information is
Mhm.
that pitch 11 or 10, 12, I guess depending on the information, is pitch 12 has a bit of a squeeze. And it
Mhm.
says has a squeeze that's hard but can be done with a pack on.
Yeah.
And so like that's one where I might tag the bag behind just to not deal with it.
Just to not have to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pain in the ass to do a squeeze and just like decide you don't want the pack on.
In the middle of it. Yeah. No, made that mistake too many times.
Yep. And then it looks like the crux pitch is the last pitch.
Yep. Yeah.
It is what it's saying, and it can be done as a tension traverse at a 0 and is decently easy to aid.
Mhm.
But that's fun that the hardest pitch is the last one.
It's right at the top. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After you've climbed 14 other pitches.
Yep.
Cool.
And it's 510C free is what like my guidebook
Yep.
is saying. So like I think
Cool.
obviously when we get there, make that call, switch over. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for me, the other stuff that like, because I think getting the rock climbing information is like what we often bias towards doing because it's what we're used to. But for trips
Yeah.
like this, where it's like a week, 2 weeks out,
Yeah.
one of the things that we should probably spend more time on early is like, what's our food going to be?
Yep. Yep.
In that logistics plan.
Yeah.
And so like, I imagine you guys will be bringing a stove, and you'll hopefully be near running water
Yeah.
near the bivy site
Mhm.
coming off those glaciers,
Yeah.
which helps because you don't have to melt snow. And then I know a lot of folks are like, oh, just like Alpine water is so good, like you don't need to filter it. I
No,
personally always bring a filter bottle,
absolutely. Yeah. Like I've got
especially in
like
these
the little
popular
filter
zones.
system. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen the Katadyn like squeeze bottles or like some of the other squeeze bottle options?
Yeah. So I don't have like one of the squeeze bottle options, but I've already got one. It's got like the bladder option where you like like fill up the
Hmm.
bladder
Yeah.
and then have the filter there too. I imagine it's like the
Awesome.
similar sort of thing. Like that's what we're
Yeah.
planning
Like
on bringing.
one of the hang bags.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are a little bit more efficient for longer trips. So
Hmm.
that's nice. And then you have a bigger bladder that you can use to store water as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
And so those work really nicely. And yeah, like in these popular like bivvy areas, there's so much poop everywhere
Yeah, all the
that
poop, like, as we were talking about with before we got on the call of, like, the job of, like, ranger instructors moving around the patrol base sites, it's, like, just because there's just so much poop. People bring
yeah.
so much.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you put 40 people, I mean, speaking of patrol base, like 40 people in a spot in the woods.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, like, it's gross.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, like one of the things you get taught during some training that you might do for like prison camps is like enjoy the small victories. And
mhm.
like being in a ranger school patrol base is kind of like being in a prison camp.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so like one of the small victories we always had as students was to place the slit trench right near where you're going to do the op order,
Yeah, no,
because you know the
as
instructors hate it.
yeah, every time, that was, like, half of them probably. And it's like you're just standing there and you're just, you just have to keep a straight face while this guy is just absolutely blowing up this slit trench. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like as you are turning around and you see a butt just
yep,
facing you.
yeah, there's so much butts and
Yeah.
poop.
Yep. Right on. Good tangent.
Yep, good. I
What
got that out of the way.
what other information would be useful for you in getting prepped for this?
Really, I just need to do kind of what I think the hard work is of like I'm about to like go make like the full packing list and like break down of like, all right, here's how much like checking out to see if there are any gaps really in the gear. Like we obviously have all of the things,
Hmm.
like, but just making sure that the right stuff makes it to our packs before we step off, and
Totally.
like weighing out the food and like planning the food for each of the days is
Yep.
like what my next sort of step is. Like I think like Becky Chenard, like not planning on bivvying, especially since we're leaving from the East Creek camp. But if there's like any harder routes, like if we just get like a glorious weather window like that we want to add on to, like figure out, all right, what food is going to be with us for the route and like need to save
Hmm.
for that versus what food is going to be like camp food, essentially.
Totally. Yeah, and I how many like trips like this have you done before where you've spent overnights out, if any?
Not a ton. Like most of them
Okay.
have been like either in a day kind of missions. Like the sort of longer trips we've done is like, like we climbed the nose, we did it over, like spent like 3 nights on the wall. So, but
Cool.
like that's completely different, like hauling daily versus like carrying everything out and working through that. So like most of the other things I've
Yep.
done have been at least like one night or like in a day mission sort of things.
Cool.
So yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, like just what I'm thinking in here and then is like some of the prep could be like moving fast through, especially the easier terrain, or moving efficiently, not necessarily
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I pulled up to share, and I can share this Excel doc with you or this
Hmm.
Google sheet with you, is like how like this is my Shasta meal planning sheet.
Okay.
And so for this one, this was 8 people over 3 days. And you can see that where I'm highlighting now. And then I just go and pick like how many people, how many days or servings of that thing. So for this one, oatmeal.
Yeah.
And then this sheet has formulas in it that tells us like the total number of liters of water we'll need
Oh,
for that
sweet.
number of people and those meals.
Yeah.
If we know that there's running water, I can click that in
Hmm.
a second. It also gives us the water that we need or the amount of fuel rather that we need
Yeah.
for that water.
Mhm.
And so for this one with 8 people in 3 days, and this sheet overestimates, so it already has like your margin built in.
Built in on that end.
Yeah, so you don't need to bring extra.
Cool.
And for white gas and isopro, so if you brought white gas stoves or if you brought some canister stoves,
Yeah.
like they're interchangeable by the fuel
Mhm.
amounts. So it's a 1-to-1. There's not a conversion that's needed.
Okay,
So
nice.
it's like if you didn't want to bring white gas, you could just bring 103 ounces
Ounces of.
of total gas for this example.
Okay.
And then if there is running water, I can click that.
Mhm.
And now you'll see that it took off like 40 ounces of fuel.
Yeah, because you don't have to
Because
melt the snow. Yeah.
exactly, because melting snow just takes so much frickin' fuel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you guys planning to bring canister stoves or white gas or a mix?
Canister stoves is the plan.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one or
Um,
two.
we've got two. I've
Okay.
got one of the like little small. We both have like the standard like jet boil ones, and
Yep.
then I also have a small like where it's just the burner, like the MSR, just
Okay.
one wind burner one,
Cool.
and that would be
Yep.
like our kind of backup. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and for these longer trips, like my
hmm
preference for 2 people is like, can you get away with doing like a small, like some small ones? Yes, but
yeah,
honestly, like for example, I really like the MSR reactor. Is like you could bring like the 2.5
2.5 liter
liter
pot
pot.
thing. Yeah,
Um, if you can find it, like that's
yeah,
really nice for cooking these meals. Like for example, one of the meals on there is like chicken curry, and like essentially that's like curry paste,
hmm
coconut milk powder, and rice, and then
yeah,
like your protein of choice.
hmm
For that, like you could bring sausages, you could bring chicken,
yeah,
in little packets, and then like you can make all of that in the pot,
yeah,
uh, and then just like let it sit and like simmer it occasionally
mm,
because like for instant rice, for example, you do need to simmer it a little bit, like bump the heat a little bit.
yeah.
Whereas on dehy meals, you can generally just like throw the water in and
Throw
you're
water
good.
in and it's done. Yeah,
Yeah, and like dehy meals can be nice and simple, but
yeah,
on trips that are longer like this, one, they destroy my gut,
yeah. And they're
and
expensive.
two, they're expensive, and
Yeah,
three, they take up a ton more space.
yeah,
Like you can get like a day's worth of food for 2 people into like a thing that's like the size of a gallon Ziploc or less.
hmm
Well, really less. Like that's like a gallon
yeah,
Ziploc is like 3 days of food for 2 people.
yeah,
Whereas like if you take 3 days worth of food for dehy meals, like that's like
yeah.
2 to 3 gallon Ziploc size
Giant
spaces.
bags. Yeah,
The other thing you could do is like take a few, like if you're say going to do pad thai dehy meals for 1 day's food, is you could take them and combine them into one bag
hmm
for both of you,
hmm
and then you could share that bag. Like that's another way to save on some space.
yeah, yeah. Combining those dehydrated ones.
Yep. And then I'll often use like, and then for like call it a quote unquote bowl or what you're going to eat out of.
hmm
The two options I'll often go to if I'm trying to go a little lighter is I'll just reuse dehy bags,
Yeah,
or those like reusable silicone Ziploc bags you can buy.
yeah, yeah. Like stasher things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Those work really nicely
hmm
for this for food bags as well.
Yeah, I've made like oatmeal and like those things, so you can just like have them all preset and just pour water in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so nice to have everything packed before you go, just so it's like by day.
Yep.
Because I'm an idiot, I label all of them, and I'm gonna forget. Like I just know myself, so I label every
Absolutely.
bag. It's like day 1 breakfast, day
Yep.
2 dinner, and I write that in Sharpie, and
hmm
I try to put everything in bags by day.
Yeah.
On longer trips, I'll do like in a stuffed sack, 3 days of food.
hmm
Generally, actually, for you with 2 people, you'll probably be able to get about 5 days of food into one stuffed sack.
Yeah.
And so you're even able to separate out by like day 1 through 5, day 5 through 10, and however long you're going.
Sweet.
And then I'll share this sheet with you, but it also at the bottom, and I'm not going to pull it back up, but it gives you like ratios of things.
hmm
So it'll give you like number of oatmeal packets. And for this one, for example, for each breakfast, it says 3 oatmeal packets, but you can adjust that unit if you
Yeah.
only want 2. for
Gotcha.
example, and
Yeah.
it gives you a shopping list from that of like, here's how many ounces of cheese, here's how many ounces of rice noodles
Okay, that's
that you
sweet.
need.
Yeah.
Definitely check that based off of whatever you buy, the calories,
Yeah. Yeah.
to make sure that you have enough calories for that day.
Mhm.
And then hot drinks are one that like I always use to bump up
Yeah.
my calories, like
Yeah.
especially in stuff like this, like hot chocolate
Mhm.
pairs really nicely with coffee.
Yeah. Dump them both in, just mix them up.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Or like you can get like apple cider for some calories, or like
Okay.
some other mixes are really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, I'll share this. I'll share this sheet over to you after we finish. And then if everybody watches and wants it, like feel free to just email me info@tacticalalpinism.com if you would also like the meal planning sheet. So there's one logistical piece. Are you guys planning to take one tent for the two of y'all?
Yeah, 110. I've got like the MSR, like Advanced 2 Pro.
Cool.
Yeah, so it'll 110 will fit, and then
Yeah. And it could be worth, I don't know if that bivy boulder has like an overhang or something, but if it doesn't, could be worth bringing a tarp that
mm,
you can hang so you have like a little bit more space to work off of, because
yeah,
there's some tarps that you can get off of Amazon for like $20
yeah,
that are like a pound and can make a nice usable space if you have bad weather.
yeah. I'll take a look at that. Yeah, mhm. At the very least, cook in it or something.
Yeah, exactly. And you can build a kitchen under it.
Hmm.
You also have like mega mid type tarps, but those are $400.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, the Amazon tarps are great. Like some of the ones I've gotten are like 10 foot by 10 foot,
Mm,
and they work really nicely for this sort of thing.
sweet.
Anything else you'd like to hit that we haven't hit yet?
Uh, I think I'm pretty good. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I look forward to touching base with you after you finish
Yeah,
this.
yeah. I'll let you know and follow up, and then I'll bring my like GPS watch and the thing too, so we can overlay it over on the maps
Yeah.
too. Because I think that's just always fun. Like how close did the plan match like what we actually did?
Yeah.
And how long those things took us.
I love that piece too,
Hmm.
because it like really helps with like seeing like with the review. So it'd be like, okay, how did our plan work? And that review and refinement helps make the next time better.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the one thing we didn't hit during this discussion is like actually mapping out the descent
yeah,
as
yeah.
well as sort of like
Hmm.
that fourth route.
Hmm.
And so that's like one remaining piece would be like mapping out that descent route after the rappels. And
Yeah,
what I didn't say yet is I avoid mapping the technical sections,
yeah.
because in sort of like mark the start, mark the finish, but I don't
Hmm.
map the technical sections because it's largely useless. And
Yeah,
like a topo and a picture is going to be way more useful.
absolutely.
And so like taking a picture of the route, making sure you have the topo and making sure you have a picture like with the route drawn on it is super nice for these established areas.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right on. Thanks for doing this. And I'll let you know when I post this. It'll probably be within 2 weeks.
Okay,
It'll be
sweet.
decently quick.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'll let you know how everything goes.